When you decide to go completely no contact with a narcissistic person, something important changes in the dynamic, even if you cannot see it from the outside. You stop calling, stop texting, stop checking in, and stop giving them access to your attention. For many people, this creates an immediate question. What is happening in that person's mind now that you are no longer available? The answer can depend heavily on the history between you. A relationship that lasted several years can create a very different pattern from one that lasted only a few months. The longer you were involved, the more familiar they may be with your emotional responses, your habits, and the ways you usually react when they create distance or conflict. When no contact begins, they may initially assume that your silence is temporary. They may believe that eventually your emotions will become stronger than your decision. In their mind, you are the person who cares, the person who feels deeply, and therefore the person who will eventually break the silence. This is why staying consistent becomes so important. No contact is not meant to be a game designed to make them chase you. It is a boundary that says you are no longer participating in the same cycle. If you decide to maintain it, consistency matters. It means not finding excuses to send a message on their birthday, not contacting them because you miss them, and not using mutual connections as a reason to reopen communication. Even if you once had a good relationship with someone in their family, reaching out can still reopen a door you deliberately chose to close. The message becomes much clearer when your actions match your decision. You are no longer available for the old dynamic. In the beginning, do not assume that their silence means they are sitting somewhere devastated and thinking about everything they did to you. A person with strong narcissistic traits may respond very differently. Instead of immediately reflecting on your absence, they may turn their attention toward finding another source of validation, attention, admiration, or emotional stimulation. Some may already have another person waiting in the background. They may have been developing another connection while they were still involved with you, because having another option can make them feel more secure and less dependent on any one person. Being without attention can feel deeply uncomfortable for someone who relies heavily on outside validation, so they may quickly look for someone else to fill that space. They might begin talking to a new person, reconnect with an old contact, become more active socially, or seek attention from several people at once. From the outside, it can even look as though your absence means absolutely nothing to them. But that appearance does not necessarily tell you what is happening internally. The important point is that you should not measure the value of your decision by whether they immediately chase you. Their behavior is about their patterns, not your worth. They may become fascinated with someone new because the connection feels fresh and exciting. They may also keep additional people within reach in case the current connection does not work out. This is why trying to provoke jealousy, monitoring their social media, or waiting for evidence that they are suffering keeps you emotionally connected to the same cycle you were trying to escape. No contact becomes powerful when you stop using it as a way to watch what they do and start using it as a way to reclaim your own attention. Then, as time passes, circumstances can change. The new person may not respond to them the way they expected. The excitement may fade. Conflicts may develop. The person they turn to for validation may become less available, establish stronger boundaries, or simply refuse to tolerate the same behavior you once tolerated. That is often when someone from the past may suddenly come back into their thoughts. This does not automatically mean they have experienced genuine emotional growth or finally understood the damage they caused. Sometimes it simply means the situation that replaced you is no longer providing what they wanted. Some people with strong narcissistic patterns dislike completely closing doors because keeping previous relationships available can give them a sense of security and control. They may therefore test whether you are still reachable with a casual message, an indirect question, a sudden memory, or some other seemingly harmless reason for contact. Not every narcissistic person returns, and there is no guaranteed timeline. Whether they attempt to reconnect can depend on the relationship, the way the separation happened, what they believe they can still receive from you, and whether they think you are still emotionally accessible. If there was something they strongly valued, such as attention, financial support, professional connections, physical intimacy, social status, a comfortable lifestyle, or another form of practical benefit, that may influence whether they attempt to reopen communication. But this is where your boundary matters most. Their return should not automatically be interpreted as proof of love, regret, or transformation. The real question is not whether they come back. The real question is whether you are willing to return to the pattern you worked so hard to leave behind. Narcissist recovery begins when your peace stops depending on what they think, what they feel, or whether they come looking for you. One of the reasons a narcissistic person may eventually return is to find out whether they still have access to you. They may not come back because they have suddenly understood your pain or developed the ability to maintain a healthy relationship. Sometimes they simply want to test the door and see whether you are still willing to open it. This is where hoovering can appear. After spending time with someone new, the excitement may begin to disappear, problems may develop, or they may simply decide that enough time has passed for you to calm down. If you went no contact after discovering lies, manipulation, cheating, gaslighting, or other behavior that made you realize the relationship was unhealthy, they may wait until they believe the emotional intensity has faded. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a message can appear. How have you been? It has been a long time. I was just thinking about you. Or perhaps, I miss talking to you. Notice what is often missing from these messages: accountability. Instead of addressing what actually happened, they may behave as though the entire conflict has disappeared. There may be no meaningful acknowledgement of the damage, no serious conversation about what caused the separation, and no evidence that the underlying behavior has changed. The goal can simply be to reopen communication and see whether they still have influence over you. This can be especially painful because you may have entered the relationship believing their promises were genuine. You imagined a future together, trusted what they told you, and invested emotionally in the person you thought they were. When that image collapses, you are not only grieving the relationship, you are also grieving the version of the future you believed you were going to have. This is why the aftermath can feel so confusing. You may look back and wonder how someone who once appeared intensely interested could become distant so quickly. In relationships involving strong narcissistic patterns, affection can sometimes be intense at the beginning, especially during periods of love bombing. There may be constant attention, compliments, promises, messages, and an overwhelming sense that you have finally found someone who understands you. But when they become confident that they have secured your attachment, that intensity may begin to decline. The pursuit was exciting, but maintaining genuine emotional closeness requires consistency, responsibility, empathy, and effort. If those qualities are missing, the relationship can begin to feel very different once the initial excitement disappears. Their attention may drift elsewhere, and they may begin looking for another person who offers novelty, admiration, or validation. This does not mean every person who loses interest is narcissistic, and it does not mean every relationship follows the same pattern. But when manipulation and exploitation are consistently present, the shift can leave you feeling as though you were valued only while you were difficult to obtain. Once you recognized the pattern and chose no contact, their attention may have moved toward other people, but that does not mean they have permanently forgotten you. A hoover can happen later when another relationship becomes disappointing or when they want to know whether you are still emotionally available. The important thing is not to confuse their return with proof that the relationship has suddenly become healthy. You may also find yourself asking a painful question during no contact: do they actually miss me? The answer requires separating missing a person from missing what that person provided. Someone can miss your attention, your availability, your emotional support, your financial help, your companionship, your admiration, or the stability you brought into their life without genuinely understanding your emotional needs. That distinction matters. Healthy love is not simply about wanting someone when they are gone. It involves caring about their well-being while they are present, respecting their boundaries, taking responsibility when you cause harm, and making an effort to repair problems instead of repeatedly creating them. If someone repeatedly risks losing you through dishonesty, manipulation, disrespect, or emotional neglect, their later attempt to return does not erase those choices. A narcissistic person may also assume that you will always remain available. They may believe that the connection is still there whenever they decide they want it again. They can become overly confident that you will not move forward, that you will still be emotionally attached, or that nobody else will give them the kind of attention you once provided. That assumption can continue until reality proves otherwise. Your job is not to demonstrate that you have moved on just to make them jealous. Your job is to actually move forward for yourself. If they discover that you are dating someone else, they may react strongly, particularly if they feel they have lost access or control, but even that reaction should not be mistaken for genuine love. Jealousy and possession are not the same thing as emotional commitment. Their reaction can also depend on what is happening in the rest of their life. If they are surrounded by new attention and several sources of validation, they may appear completely unconcerned about you. But when those connections fail, when a new relationship becomes difficult, or when they experience a period where they are not receiving the attention they expect, they may suddenly remember the people they previously left behind. That is when hoovering can become more persistent. They may return with affection, nostalgia, apologies, compliments, promises, or declarations that they have changed. Before allowing that person back into your life, ask yourself one simple question. If they genuinely valued me, why were they willing to repeatedly risk losing me? Genuine care does not require perfection, but it does require accountability and a willingness to repair what has been damaged. If someone disappears for months or years and then returns without addressing the reasons you left, the passage of time alone has not solved anything. And if you maintain no contact for a long period and they never return, that does not mean you were worthless or forgotten. It may simply mean they found another direction for their attention, or that the dynamic no longer serves what they want. Either way, your healing cannot depend on whether they come back. Narcissist recovery means reaching the point where their return is no longer the measure of your value, and their absence is no longer the measure of your importance. A narcissistic person may come back when something has gone wrong elsewhere, when another source of attention is no longer satisfying, or when they believe there is still something they can receive from you. Sometimes the return is also a test. They want to discover whether they can still get a response, whether you are still emotionally attached, and whether the old influence they had over you is still there. Even a simple conversation can become an opening they use to restart the familiar cycle. That is why it is important to remember what brought you to no contact in the first place. Think about the dishonesty, manipulation, broken promises, confusion, betrayal, and the future you were encouraged to believe in. You were given an image of a relationship that did not match the reality you eventually experienced. Going back simply because someone suddenly becomes charming can erase the clarity you gained while you were away. Sometimes physical attraction also becomes part of the trap. A person can be beautiful, charismatic, successful, or extremely charming and still be unhealthy for you. Appearance is not character, and attraction is not evidence of emotional safety. When someone has little else to offer in terms of honesty, responsibility, empathy, or consistency, they may rely heavily on charm and appearance to keep people interested. That can make you question yourself and wonder whether the relationship deserves another chance. But if allowing them back means returning to the same lies and instability, then attraction becomes a distraction from the real issue. Narcissist recovery requires learning to judge a relationship by behavior, not by appearance, chemistry, promises, or temporary affection. Or you may notice that after being allowed back into your life, they behave differently for a short period. They may become attentive, affectionate, apologetic, or unusually cooperative. For a while, you might think, maybe this time really is different. But if the underlying patterns have not changed, the old problems eventually return. The arguments return, the disappearing returns, the manipulation returns. Sometimes they may even keep other people in the background while making you believe that the relationship has been restored. Once they realize you accepted them back despite what happened before, they may interpret that as evidence that you will tolerate the behavior again. Every repeated breakup followed by reconciliation can strengthen that assumption. They may begin believing that no matter how far they push your boundaries, you will eventually return. That does not mean you are weak or desperate. It means the cycle has taught both people something unhealthy about what the relationship will tolerate. This is why problems need to be addressed directly rather than repeatedly escaping and returning without resolution. Healthy relationships can involve disagreements, misunderstandings, and periods when two people need space. That is normal. What becomes destructive is using separation as a substitute for solving the actual problem. Long periods apart can create additional complications, especially when other relationships or emotional connections develop during the separation. When the couple reunites, those experiences can become another source of suspicion and conflict, adding new problems to the ones that were never resolved in the first place. If two people repeatedly cannot find common ground, communicate honestly, or create a relationship where both individuals feel respected and secure, they may need to accept that staying together is not always the healthiest choice. This becomes even more important when marriage, shared responsibilities, or children are involved. Decisions made by adults can affect an entire family, and children can absorb the tension, instability, and emotional confusion surrounding repeated conflict and separation. That is why impulsive decisions should be considered carefully. If you choose no contact, it should not be used as a punishment designed to make the other person suffer or chase you. It should be a clear decision to remove yourself from a destructive dynamic. You are acknowledging that whatever good moments existed do not cancel out the repeated dishonesty, disrespect, fear, or manipulation. A relationship cannot remain healthy without trust. If you constantly wonder whether you are being lied to, betrayed, manipulated, or deceived, you are not experiencing the emotional security that a healthy relationship should provide. No contact can feel lonely at first because you are losing a familiar routine as well as a person. You may miss the good moments, question your decision, and wonder whether you should give the relationship another opportunity. But temporary loneliness can be far healthier than spending years trying to make an unstable relationship become something it has repeatedly shown you it cannot be. Your time is limited, and one of the most painful mistakes is spending that time trying to earn honesty from someone who repeatedly chooses deception. When you finally decide that the relationship is over, stop giving unnecessary access to your life. If contact is unavoidable, such as when children are involved, keep communication focused on practical responsibilities and follow the appropriate legal or custody arrangements rather than using personal conversations to reopen old emotional arguments. In situations where direct communication creates problems, professional or legal channels may help maintain clearer boundaries. In other circumstances, complete silence may be possible. The general principle is simple. Do not keep feeding a cycle that you already decided to leave. If someone connected to them attempts to carry messages back to you, you do not have to respond. You can remain calm, brief, and emotionally neutral. Some people describe this as becoming emotionally uninteresting or using a gray rock approach, meaning that you stop providing dramatic reactions, personal information, arguments, or emotional fuel. The goal is not to become cruel. It is to protect your peace. Once you stop participating in the games lose much of their power. And after prolonged emotional abuse, you may notice that the relationship has changed you in ways you did not immediately recognize. You might struggle to control your reactions, become easily overwhelmed, expect something bad to happen, or develop a pessimistic view of relationships and life. Constant manipulation can leave a person questioning their own judgment, doubting their decisions, and anticipating disappointment even when nothing is currently wrong. These patterns are not proof that something is fundamentally wrong with you. They can be learned responses to prolonged emotional stress, and recognizing them is the beginning of changing them. Narcissist recovery is not simply about getting away from the person. It is also about rebuilding the parts of yourself that became weakened while you were trying to survive the relationship. After prolonged emotional abuse, pessimism can become more than simply expecting something to go wrong. It can influence the way a person interprets their entire life. They may question the past, distrust the present, and feel uncertain about the future. Even when something positive happens, they may immediately search for the hidden problem or assume that the good moment will eventually turn against them. Repeated criticism and emotional degradation can gradually convince someone that they are incapable, unsuccessful, or somehow never good enough. Once those beliefs become deeply rooted, motivation can begin to disappear as well. A person may stop doing things they once enjoyed, lose interest in hobbies, avoid responsibilities, or struggle to begin even simple tasks. This is not always laziness. Sometimes it is the result of feeling that effort will not change anything. When someone has repeatedly been made to feel that their choices are wrong and their abilities are inadequate, eventually they may stop trusting their own ability to create positive results. Anxiety can make this even more visible. A person may become restless, constantly alert, or uncomfortable when nothing is actually happening. They might tap their fingers, move their feet, bite their nails, pace around, or struggle to sit peacefully because their mind is continuously analyzing possible threats. Their body can remain in a state of tension even after the abusive relationship has ended. Overthinking becomes an attempt to predict what might happen next because predicting danger once felt necessary for emotional survival. What looks like nervousness from the outside can therefore be connected to a much deeper pattern of constantly preparing for the next criticism, rejection, argument, or disappointment. Another reaction that can emerge is anger. Someone who has spent a long time being controlled, humiliated, dismissed, or manipulated may eventually develop a strong desire to regain the power they feel was taken from them. They may imagine the abuser finally experiencing consequences or hope that one day the situation will reverse and the person who caused the pain will understand what it feels like. That desire for justice is understandable, especially after repeated mistreatment. But when anger remains unresolved for too long, it can begin affecting relationships that had nothing to do with the original abuse. A person may become suspicious, easily irritated, defensive, or unusually reactive toward people who are actually safe. The anger that could not be expressed toward the abuser may unconsciously be redirected toward others. This is one reason healing requires more than simply leaving the toxic relationship. The goal is not to spend the rest of your life proving that the other person was wrong. The goal is to regain your emotional freedom. Another major consequence is diminished self-confidence. Constant criticism can slowly change the way you see yourself. When someone repeatedly tells you that your opinions are foolish, your decisions are wrong, your feelings are excessive, or your abilities are inadequate, eventually those messages can become internal beliefs. You may begin hiding your experiences because you fear judgment or embarrassment. You may stop speaking openly because you expect criticism before you even receive it. The abuser may no longer be present, yet their voice can remain inside your thinking. You might question ordinary choices, seek reassurance constantly, or feel uncomfortable receiving compliments because your mind has become accustomed to believing the opposite. Prolonged emotional control can make independence feel frightening. You may doubt your decisions, react strongly to ordinary situations, or become overly agreeable to avoid conflict. Constant criticism can create anxiety, low confidence, and fear of rejection. But these reactions are learned responses, not permanent flaws. Healing means rebuilding trust in yourself, setting healthy boundaries, expressing your needs, and learning that disagreement does not have to mean danger. Your past may shape your reactions, but it does not control your future.